I don't think you'd actually have people ever get to make their character. They'd be sitting there in the screen like, oh god, what do I do now? Since you have shared with me the 9 different options to open up, open Ark, there happens to be something related to that we were looking at in the forums, following some of the discussion of previous episodes that we had, so I thought we would do a little bit of a delving deeper on the idea of choice paralysis, and more importantly, how to try and avoid this in
less choices.
Games. You just get less choices.
Less choices. Done. Segment, great, perfect.
That was a great delving deeper. It was the quickest one we've ever done. But no, let's dig into that a little bit more than that. Because I'm kind of trying to figure out, when you see those 9 choices for Ark, for instance, I wouldn't necessarily be, worry if there were just a few choices. But what is the point where you see a list? How many items has to be on that list before you kind of go, well, that's just too many for me to deal with? Before I have to really stop and think.
Depending on what it is.
Yeah.
4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah. This, launching a game, that's sort of the meta part about this. But, actually in-game, I'm kind of trying to work out, how much choice I want to give people at any one time. Because right now, since I am actually playing a spellcaster in D&D, for instance, there are spell lists.
Lots of them.
There's lots of spell lists, and bards periodically can look through the whole freaking thing to determine what they want to do. And that has made me very aware of, the sheer level number of spells. And I do start to realize why the classes themselves usually have a more structured number that they can do, why they don't have all the spells available to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, in-game reason and lore reason is different casters cast with different abilities. A druid cast from nature, and a paladin or a cleric cast from divine magic, so that reflects their, what they can cast. Right. And a sorcerer and wizard are arcane, but slightly different arcane.
Wizards like their books.
Wizards love their books.
Wizards love to use the books.
Take away a wizard's book and he's useless.
That's true.
That's like a teacher.
The sorcerer, though, it flows through them, and they can manipulate.
They use the force.
They use the force, exactly. And then, of course, you have the warlocks who made a deal with a patron
to get
the
demon
powers.
If you will.
Yeah, to get demon powers. So there's that.
Not always demons.
Okay. And then bards sing songs.
Yes.
Sing songs, tell tales, basically.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So they don't give you access to every single spell in the game.
Right.
And I also started to realize, and I thought that this was really important, is for a lot of those lists, for every single level that you go to, because they will dole them out over the course of the game as you get higher spell lists, and will not just give you a bunch of spells up at the start, there are different kinds of spells that will do different kinds of things. One of the tricky ones that I was seeing is when you get to 3rd level, there are, on the wizard spell list at least, a lot of high damage spells that will do slightly different things. Like if I were looking at 2 very famous ones, Fireball and Lightning Bolt. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they both basically are 8d6 area effects.
Kind of.
Sort of, yeah. Different damage types, though.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that Fireball is an area of effect, circle.
Yeah.
And
Fireball is an explosion at an area.
Right. And your Lightning Bolt is you shot a death ray out from you.
Yeah, Lightning Bolts are really cool. It's hey, there's just a ton of enemies coming at me, and you're just cool. Just zap. And it's just, I think, a 5 foot wide.
It's 5 by 100.
Yeah, so it's just this 100 foot long, 5 foot wide beam of lightning death.
And I'm like, you know what? In an urban environment, if you're actually in streets,
yeah,
that's what you want. you want that for street combat. And then it just sets everything on fire around it too.
Yeah, it can definitely do that
because it's
too.
lightning. Yeah. But like there, if I'm only really able to choose one of those spells, now I got to really think, because they're both real high damage spells, but they're also going to function slightly differently. When I have my bard spells, though, I did notice that a lot of them function in very, very specific ways. Some of them are going to charm people. Some of them are going to be control spells. Some of them are going to be damage spells, etc., etc. And they're going to have very specific usages depending on what you want to do. So I think it eliminates some of the choice in that, but I still have found it really tricky to figure out what I want.
Well, yeah, see, you're a bard, for instance. A wizard would generally have a school that they pick as the school of magic they studied.
Yeah.
For example, so like maybe if you were an illusion-focused wizard, you would say, all right, well, I'm illusion-focused, so my illusion spells are better than, say, other things. They're harder to resist, and they get, like, I think you get an extra slot or something for those school spells, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't quote me, it's been a while since I looked through a wizard at all.
Yeah.
But you'd go, all right, well, I could do an evocation school, which is damage dealing, or I could do an illusion spell, and it would just be a lot better in what I'm good at.
Right.
So choices like that are a little easier if you've already made the choice that you're an illusion wizard, for instance.
Sure. I just want to be a necromancer and just do all the Raise the Dead spells.
Sure, then you would easily pick Raise Dead.
Yeah, just Raise Dead, and I don't have to think about it at all. It's perfect. I did also notice, though, that there are a lot of casters that will have a certain number of spells that automatically get prepared at certain levels. So they just kind of take that, like clerics are one of those, where depending on what your subclass is, you get a couple spells, and it's just, you get those. I would imagine that if the mechanic was that you can pick those spells, or that you can add certain spells, you might be, seeing a possible choice paralysis there.
Well, clerics and druids are interesting because they don't really pick a spell they want to learn.
Okay.
They just pick what spells they're preparing every day.
Okay.
They get access to their entire spell list.
Oh, that's handy.
Because spontaneous caster.
Oh, okay.
So I can go, okay, well, today I'm going to take these spells, and tomorrow I'm going to take those spells.
Oh, that's
You
neat.
can swap them out, like, whenever you want, as either of those class.
Okay. Yeah, bards can't. I have to...
No. You learn spells.
I learn spells, and then the rules as written, at least, is that when you level up, you can change out one of your spells for a different one.
Yeah.
All right. I take advantage of it, but still. The benefit is, of course, that periodically you get to just pull from any spell list you want.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's great. Wizards, on the other hand, though, you gotta put everything down in your spellbook, baby.
Yeah, and that costs money.
Yep, and time. Takes a lot of time.
Used to cost experience, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They don't really use experience for anything except for the leveling up part now. I don't.
There are games that you do use it in.
Oh, sure.
That part of your level, like FFG, for instance, some of their games, what you do is you spend experience as you level.
Oh, sure.
So what you would do is say, all right, you hit a point where you can spend experience. Now you have all these experience points. You can buy different things with them. So your experience is used as currency. Those systems can be fun. But then you usually have a lot more choice too, because you're not generally a class specifically.
Sure. That being said, actually, 1879, which I know is a system you're not familiar with, but when I was playing the Expendables, 1879 is a system based off of Earth Dawn, and the way they do that is they give you adventure points for doing things in the game. And then the adventure points are actually what you use to raise up stats or add to your durability, which gives you more hit points, or learn new skills and stuff like that. But you don't technically have a level. You would spend adventure points to raise up your mastery of things.
I almost think it would be really cool to have a hybrid of class and like spending like EXP or adventure points or whatever. So like maybe you have like a general archetype. So I'm a melee fighter, or maybe you don't even do that. It's just like, yeah, here are your your 6 stats, and here are different sets of skills you can go and buy.
Yeah.
So you could be like, cool, I'm gonna go strength and intellect, and I'm gonna wield a 2-handed sword, and I'm also gonna learn magic. I think systems like that can be really cool, but again, then you get the choice paralysis of so many options.
Well, yeah, because like imagine if you had a system. Actually, the 1879 system does this, where you can take your base stats and you can actually raise them up, but the only way that you actually raise them up throughout the game is if you specifically spend adventure points on them, and you have a certain cost for upgrading them once, and then another time to upgrade them twice, and you can upgrade them a couple times. Similar to your individual skills, where as you raise them up and you get higher totals, it will use more adventure points to do that, but that's how you get better at things. It would be interesting. I mean, it would be kind of neat if you had a system where you had like 3 basic archetypes, and then the abilities and stuff that you saw from like maybe D&D, where you have like the fighters, battle masteries, and the barbarians rage abilities and stuff, were options that you could pick, and you could spend money on making them better, or building and customize what things you want to synergize with. But that I would imagine, if not accurately like described up at the front, or if that was all given to you right at the front, that would be a lot for. I don't think you'd actually have people ever get to make their character. They'd be sitting there in the screen like, oh god, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Big thing I put too in the idea of choice paralysis is, I don't want any big decisions when I make my character.
Right
up at the front. Level 1, just started out the game. Please don't give me much to think about right away. Introduce it to me after I've gotten my feet wet and I've figured out the basic part of the game. They have done this very well. Since we were talking about Bethesda, they usually do this by going through like, well, what does your character look like? And then there's a little bit of time, and then it's like, oh, well, like, what's your sign? What are your basic stats? And then we'll go in a little bit more and talk about it more. And then, of course, systems where you actually just start with a set score, like a basic score in everything, and then you just upgrade over the course of time. So I'm starting out, everything is just 1, and then I move forward from there. That's good. It keeps me from getting too much into the choice paralysis. But what are some of the ways that we might be able to avoid getting too deep in the weeds? Like, when do you know that there's a problem?
Generally, when people start going, I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I have 16 choices and all of them are equally as good.
So, like, I would imagine if you're playtesting your game, one of the first things would be, like, how long is it taking people to actually get into the game? Like, where are the stopgaps where people are not playing the game anymore and are trying to make decisions? And what is the average amount of time that people are taking making those decisions?
I think one of the biggest things would be not giving people a bunch of choices without having them first experience each of those things.
Right. That would also be good.
So it's like, oh man, I don't know what to choose because I've never done 10 out of the 16 things here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, do I want to go into archery? I don't know. I've never used a bow yet.
Yeah, exactly. Also helpful, as I'm thinking about it, since we've been talking about Diablo, skill trees. Because now I don't actually have to pick from like 50 different abilities or something like that. I take one of these 3 trees. Now I have a basic thing that I can gain from each one of those. If I do
trees
well
are
in that.
interesting because you don't really see them very often in tabletop.
No,
at least not in the way that we're used to them.
No, you don't see it like where, oh, you could learn this spell, but you have to have learned these 3 other spells first before you take that. Like,
I think it could be interesting if you did something like that, but I don't know if it'll work as well for tabletop.
No, I think that in some ways, similar to, like, wizards, it would be about the schools that you're in. Like, maybe some of the more powerful spells are, related to having knowledge of certain other things and customizing that you know those particular lines. Because I know that there are a couple spells, not many, but I think there are a couple spells that you have to be a specific wizard to learn.
Yeah, definitely.
But not a ton. But, so, yeah, I would say that if you're looking at it, I guess the other thing, too, would be when people jump off of your game, especially if you're, an actual video game designer, and you can see around what time people usually stop playing, figure out what that normally is in terms of like a choice that people have to make. Because if it's during that time, chances are you've gotten to a point where it is the Bearden's ass scenario, if you're familiar with that. Bearden's ass was actually a scenario, a philosophical conundrum about the idea of choice paralysis, which is that if you put a donkey, i.e. the ass,
yes,
equidistant to 2, bales of hay, the donkey would die of starvation because the donkey would never be able to make a choice. Now, I think in practice, the donkey would just pick one and go. But
yeah, I think in practice, even though they're stubborn, I think the ass would pick one and just go for it.
Exactly. He might be an ass, but he's not a dumbass. Exactly. I think the essentialism, it would eventually be the choice between starving and just taking a bale of hay that's in front of you.
Yeah.
So at that point, the paralysis kind of goes away. In-game, though, if you have an unlimited amount of time, do you think that there might also be a place for putting a timer on how long it will take you to choose?
Like to see how long it takes, or so you have limited time?
No, like the Jeopardy do clock comes on, and before it ends, you have to pick something.
I think that'd be interesting. I think people would complain about it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think in the end, like, it would maybe benefit people making faster choices. Kind of like, you played a little bit of Curse of the Dead Gods, right?
Yep.
So kind of like the choices you have to make there, except those aren't, timed.
That's true.
It's like almost like a quick time event where it's like, are you going left, you're going right, going left, you're going right. Pick one and live with your choice. I think in a roguelite type game, it might work. Mm-hmm. If you had an RPG or tabletop game that took roguelite elements like that, it could work.
Yeah.
Although the timer is hard to pull off on tables, so.
That's true. It is kind of tricky in tabletop too, because if you get into combat, you sometimes face the idea of combat paralysis in a lot of ways, where you ask your player, what do you want to do? And then they have to think about, like, what options do they have available to them? And I think that they do a pretty good job of giving you a set number of things that you're most likely to do in the scenario, and then maybe you can work out if there's something special that you'd like to try. Trying to lead people through that can be a little bit tricky if you're new to running a game. But I think that's the reason why they're like, yeah, you can take an action. Here's a list of the things that you can do as an action. And here's, like, right here on the side, these are, like, your action skills. This is, like, a spell that you can cast. This is the sword that you use. This is the bow that you have. Yeah. To try and limit that in combat. And you've picked all of that too, so you're a little bit familiar with it before you even get into the combat. But if you do find that somebody is taking too long, they're either not familiar with their character and don't know what to do, or somebody made it for them, or of course is that they've been given so many options and you got to be able to lead them through it and figure out what's best for the scenario at hand. It's something where you see like professional GMs, and they know that, especially if you're doing this on stream.
Yeah.
And you have to keep things moving. Mm-hmm. When you have one player, I was watching one of like the Hellfire Club, the Stranger Things special that they did for the Netflix one, and sometimes the actors that were in it were kind of like, what do I want to do? And B. Dave Walters was kind of like going, okay, not telling you what to do, but I do want you to be aware of something that's on your sheet, of a thing that you can do you might not have known you could do. And you know, and also like the whole thing of like, I imagine you'd like to try and hit this, right? Yeah, you want to hit it for like as much as you possibly could. Yes, I want to do that. And it's like, okay, here's what you could do. And like, you're a paladin, let's smite a lot. Let's do a lot of smiting.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now we can run through that. So yeah, it's tricky because at a certain point, flow of game is going to get cut off if people get into the paralysis of not knowing what to do. You don't want to see it, and so trying to, even if you have a lot of options, being able to dole them out over the course of time, in smaller bite-sized chunks, is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. All right. So if you also have an idea about how you might like to make choice paralysis a little less paralyzing, if there's a special spell that you'd like to use to stop the paralysis of choice, there should be a spell that's just called choice paralysis. And it's like
the whole person.
Yeah. But that's how you could flavor that as psychic damage, like a psychic paralysis thing where you just give people a whole bunch of choices and they can't decide. And now they're paralyzed. Yes. Feels like an Acquisitions Unlimited thing or something. Incorporated. Anyway, if you have an idea about how to limit choice paralysis or how you like to do it, please let us know over on our Discord channel, or you can also let us know in the comments down below this video.